Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Shinning and I'm a second-year law student here at the University of Exeter in the UK. So I've had a very tough experience being an international student here, especially in my first year, and I've shared my experience with a bunch of people. A lot of people were either in the same position or new people who had questions, so I just thought to myself, hey, why not just do something that can be helpful to other people? So the first thing is about the visa application process, which is the toughest part because it's the most important, because that's what you need to come here. So when I was applying for a visa, I had to do it by myself. So I had to do the research on my own. And I don't want you guys to think that in this video you're going to find all the answers, but I'm going to give you a general idea as to how things are done, but you still need to do your homework. So the first thing they take into consideration is your financial circumstances. So a lot of people try to trick the government by making them think that they have enough money in their account to fund their studies and their stay when they come here. But they're not stupid. They want to see that consistency. They're going to ask for your bank statements from like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, just because they want to see, are you really in a position where you can fund your studies here? The second thing about that is the interview process. After the online application, there is an interview that you have to do, and it's face-to-face. So I went online and I saw the frequently asked questions that people usually have, and that's how I was able to prepare for my interview. They just basically want to see if you have a plan. How consistent are you? And are you going to leave after your studies? Because remember guys, you're applying for a student visa. The third thing is you should know there is a number of people that the government lets into the UK annually. So if they've said this year we're getting 5,000 international students, if you're number 5,001, they might say no. I think it's just to control and make sure that they don't have too many immigrants and too many international students. I don't know why. Just don't think that there's necessarily something wrong in your application. It's maybe that you were just too late. I know for a lot of people it's a big deal to come to the UK because of how expensive it can be. So universities in the UK are between £11,000 and £18,000 depending on the course and the university. So for non-Russell universities, those are the ones where you get 11,000, 12,000, like Buckinghamshire, Plymouth. Those ones are a bit cheaper. But if you went for universities, obviously like Oxford, Cambridge, Exeter, that's between £18,000 and £20,000. And that's only for literal subjects. If you wanted to do medical sciences or sports or dentistry, anything that has to do with science is way more expensive. It's between £22,000, even for the non-Russell group universities, between £22,000 and about £30,000. But I personally think it's worth it just because academically I consider the UK to be one of the best countries for studies. One of the advice I will give though is if for any reason you're not in a financial situation to go to a university like Oxford or Cambridge, I would recommend you start with non-Russell group universities, so the less recognized ones, and then eventually you can transfer. Now, not all universities accept transferring, but most of them do. If you have very good grades and you have a very nice profile, you can start off your first 2 years in a cheaper university and then transfer to a more expensive university, which tend to be the most recognized universities. Now, the other thing is in terms of accommodation. A lot of people usually ask, should I stay on campus? Should I live in town? That was my worry as well. So personally, I wanted to stay on campus just because I knew I would be with first year students. I knew I wouldn't have to worry about transport. I'll just go for my lectures. Life would just be easier for me, man. But unfortunately, I applied for accommodation late, so I had to live in town. The only advantage I had with that was that my accommodation created a platform where you could come into contact with the people you're going to live with, so you have an idea of how they are and see if you guys can relate on a certain number of things. But personally, I would strongly recommend be on campus, especially if you're in your first year and especially if you're an international student. If for whatever reason you don't happen to live on campus, be in a student accommodation. There are a lot of student accommodations in town. If you have a question, if you have a problem, they sort it out instantly. It's immediate. The service is just better. Whereas if you live in town in a non-student accommodation, you have to deal with the landlord. You have to deal with so many things on your own, and that can be very overwhelming and frustrating, especially for someone who is not used to the system. Also, when you're an international student, if you leave off campus, you need a guarantor. A guarantor is basically someone who is there to prove that you're going to pay your rent. And if anything were to happen, that person would be liable. In terms of pricing, living on campus is cheaper. If you live on campus, I think you'd be expected to pay between £140 right up to £250, depending on the type of accommodation you're taking. If you're taking a flat and you're sharing bathrooms and things like that, it's cheaper. But if you have a whole studio and if you have a premium studio, it's going to be more expensive. So just those little things. If you're living in town in a student accommodation, it's perfectly fine because bills are included. You have facilities, you have study areas, you have access to the gym, and little nice benefits like that. But if you're living in a house, usually bills are not included. Personally, I would just strongly advise that you live in a student accommodation. It's just better, especially for international students. Another thing people tend to ask a lot is everything with regards to jobs and work. So yes, the government gives you a working permit. It's on your biometrical residence permit, which is your visa in other words. You have the right to work for 20 hours maximum a week. That's for every international student. It doesn't change. I wouldn't advise working in your first year. Take your first year to adapt. Take your first year to familiarize yourself with the environment. There's so many things that can come to your mind. It's so overwhelming to be far from home. You don't think it's going to happen that way, but trust me, at some point it does, especially when you're like me, like you're alone. You have nobody. So take that time, please. Think about your studies, think about what you want to do, get engaged in societies, carry out activities, don't look for a job. And then in second year, when you're more prepared, you're more familiar to the place, you know your whereabouts, you've gathered experience. Now you have that confidence to go and apply for a job. And eventually here in Exeter, I don't know about other universities, but most of them, and here in Exeter specifically, the uni helps you. They guide you through applying for a CV. Like I said, there's a whole platform for that, so you're fine. For those of you who are still in high school, don't neglect anything that you're doing. Because, for example, in high school, I was part of the student council. I never thought in a million years that being secretary of the student council or being part of an organization committee for an event was going to give me the skills to work in a store. Those little things, people underrate it sometimes, but here they value it massively. So if you're taking part into anything, just even being part of a team, those skills, you transfer them, you know, they take it into account because you're demonstrating leadership, you're demonstrating teamwork, you're demonstrating hard work, you're demonstrating time management. Those things are what you need to get a job. So don't think that experiences that you're taking because they're not professional, then they don't count. They do. So you need to take that into account as well. So a lot of people have questions on to how to budget, how much do I need, how much do you spend in the this and the that. The real answer is there's no answer to that. There's no specific set answer. Everyone's financial circumstances are different and everyone's definition of enough is not the same. In your first year when you're coming, maybe have a discussion with your parents, because that's what I did, on what I'm going to spend on and how I'm going to manage it. So whichever amount they're comfortable in giving you, budget based on that. Okay, in my opinion, guys, these are the things that you have to take into consideration. Obviously, I cannot say it all because I would make an endless video, and depending on everyone's experience and circumstances, a lot of things are relative, a lot of things are different, will be different, and are going to keep on being different. This is just like the general idea, and I hope that this video is going to help as many people as possible. I'm going to make another video where I'm going to be talking about a day in my life, and it's going to give you like a more practical demonstration of how I actually do some of the things that I mentioned. If you have questions, personal questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll answer. If you're paranoid about something, or if you want to talk about something more personal, DM me on my social media as well. I'm going to leave them all here. And I just hope that it was very constructive and it's going to help all of you. Like this video, share, and subscribe. Bye.